To understand why this study matters, you have to understand what most diet research on women looks like and what it does not. Most diet studies run for 12 to 24 weeks. They test one dietary approach against a control group. They recruit relatively small numbers of participants. They measure weight loss as the primary outcome, and they are almost never designed specifically around the hormonal environment of menopause, which means their findings are applied to menopausal women without ever being validated in menopausal women. This study was different in almost every respect. The research was built on data from the Nurses' Health Study 2, a landmark longitudinal project that has followed tens of thousands of female nurses since 1989. This gave the researchers access to something that most diet studies never have. Real women followed over real time, living real lives, with their eating habits and body weights documented across multiple decades. For this particular analysis, the researchers focused on the 12 years surrounding each woman's menopause transition, 6 years before and 6 years after. Every 4 years, each woman completed a detailed food frequency questionnaire documenting what she ate and how often. Every 2 years, her body weight was recorded. That data was then used to calculate her annual rate of weight change and to track whether she developed obesity across the follow-up period. In total, the study analyzed 38,283 women, generating more than 340,000 combined years of follow-up data. It is one of the largest and longest dietary studies ever conducted specifically on women during the menopausal transition. The scale of it is what makes it credible in a way that a 12-week intervention trial simply cannot be. The baseline finding of the study is important to sit with before getting to the dietary differences because it establishes the reality that every other finding has to be understood against. On average, regardless of what they were eating, the women in this study gained approximately 0.80 kilograms, about 2 pounds, every single year across the 12-year study period. That is not a rounding error. That is a documented, consistent, year-over-year pattern that played out across more than 300,000 years of combined female experience during menopause. Over the full follow-up period, 5,214 women developed obesity. That is more than 1 in 8 of the women in the study, developing a new clinical classification during a 12-year window specifically defined by the hormonal changes of menopause. The weight gain during menopause is not anecdotal. It is not psychological. It is not the result of women eating more or moving less. The study controlled for physical activity, smoking, hormone therapy use, and baseline body weight. It is a biological reality that plays out with remarkable consistency across tens of thousands of women, independent of their conscious choices. That is the ground the study was measuring from. Now, here is where the data becomes something worth paying very close attention to. When the researchers broke the results down by dietary pattern, a clear hierarchy emerged, and it did not map onto the way most diet culture has approached menopausal weight management. The diets most strongly associated with reduced weight gain and significantly lower obesity risk were not built around restriction. They were not built around calorie counting, food group elimination, or the kind of chronic dietary discipline that most women have spent decades trying and failing to sustain. They were built around something the researchers called low insulinemic eating, dietary patterns specifically designed to avoid causing repeated spikes in insulin, the hormone whose primary job is to signal the body to store energy as fat. The strongest performer across all 11 dietary patterns tested was something called the Planetary Health Diet. This is not a brand name. It is a dietary framework developed by an international commission of nutrition scientists to describe the eating pattern most associated with long-term health and metabolic stability. It emphasizes fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, whole grains, and healthy fats. It limits ultra-processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and processed meats. It does not require purchasing a program, counting calories, or eliminating any entire food group. Women in the highest adherence group for the Planetary Health Diet had a 54% lower risk of developing obesity compared to women in the lowest adherence group. To be clear about what that number means, women who ate most closely in alignment with this pattern were more than half as likely to develop obesity during the 12-year study period as women who ate least in alignment with it. That is not a marginal finding. That is a protective effect large enough to be clinically meaningful. The Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, and healthy plant-based diet indexes all performed well in the same analysis, all associated with measurably less weight gain than the lower-scoring dietary patterns. What they share is a common foundation: whole foods, plant emphasis, minimal processing, limited refined carbohydrates, and processed meats. At the other end of the spectrum, the dietary patterns most strongly associated with weight gain and higher obesity risk were the ones characterized by high ultra-processed food consumption, high processed meat intake, high refined carbohydrate consumption, and high levels of salty snacks and fried foods. Women who ate more in this way gained more weight over the 12 years and had significantly higher rates of developing obesity, even after accounting for the other factors the researchers controlled for. This finding matters beyond just identifying what to eat more of, because it points to a specific biological mechanism that most dietary advice for menopausal women has never directly addressed. During menopause, estrogen levels fall dramatically, and one of the metabolic consequences of that hormonal shift is that insulin sensitivity decreases. The body becomes significantly less efficient at managing blood sugar than it was before menopause. When blood sugar rises, the body releases insulin to bring it back down. But in a postmenopausal body with reduced insulin sensitivity, that insulin response is larger, slower to resolve, and more likely to direct excess glucose into stored fat rather than usable energy. A diet built around ultra-processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and foods high in sugar and processed fats produces large and repeated insulin spikes throughout the day. In a postmenopausal hormonal environment, each of those spikes is activating a fat storage signal in a body that is already biologically primed to store rather than burn. The cumulative effect of that pattern across months and years is not a mystery. It is exactly what the study documented. A low insulinemic diet, one centered on whole plant foods, legumes, nuts, whole grains, and healthy fats, produces far smaller and more gradual insulin responses. It works with the metabolic reality of a postmenopausal body rather than against it. The women in this study who ate closest to that pattern gained less weight, developed obesity at dramatically lower rates, and did so not through restriction or deprivation, but through a shift in the quality and composition of what they were eating. And this is the exact point where most women get stuck, not on understanding it, but on doing it. Because a study can tell you the principle. It can tell you, with 30 years of data behind it, that eating in a way that keeps your insulin low and steady is what actually protects a menopausal body. But what it cannot do is hand you Monday's breakfast. It does not tell you what to make when you are tired on a Tuesday night, and the easy option is the exact processed blood sugar spiking food the data just warned you about. So really knowing what works and having it ready to eat are two completely different problems. This is the reason why we created the Menopause Protein Bundle. It takes the principle the study just laid out, real whole food that keeps your blood sugar steady instead of spiking it, and turns it into done-for-you meals you can actually make. Breakfasts, lunches, and dinners built around protein, fiber, and healthy fats, the same low insulin pattern the research points to. Even desserts and smoothies that satisfy a craving without sending your blood sugar through the roof. Every recipe is ready in about 10 minutes, there is nothing to track and nothing to count, and every single one is designed to work with a postmenopausal body instead of against it. So please check out the link in the description, because this could be the moment the data stops being something you read about and becomes the way you actually eat. The moment that relentless 2 pounds a year stops feeling inevitable and your meals quietly start working in your favor instead of against you. Frank Behew, the chair of the Department of Nutrition at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and one of the lead researchers on the study, described midlife as a critical yet often overlooked window for dietary counseling and chronic disease prevention. He noted specifically that gynecologists, primary care providers, and dietitians can all play a role in recommending dietary patterns with lower insulinemic potential. More nuts, legumes, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables to women navigating the menopausal transition. His framing is worth pausing on. Not a specialized prescription, not an expensive intervention, not a referral to a weight loss program. A dietary pattern built around real, widely available, affordable food. The same foods that have appeared at the top of nutritional evidence for decades, applied specifically to a window of time in women's lives when it appears to have the most measurable protective effect. The researchers were also direct about one honest limitation of the study. 90% of the participants were Caucasian women, nurses enrolled in the Nurses' Health Study, too. That demographic concentration means the findings may not translate equally across all ethnic groups, and the researchers themselves called for future studies with more diverse populations. That limitation does not diminish the scale or the rigor of what was documented here, but it is part of the honest picture of what the study shows and what it does not yet show. What the study does show across 38,283 women, 11 dietary patterns, and more than 340,000 years of combined follow-up data is this. The average menopausal woman gains approximately 2 pounds every year. That is the documented biological baseline of what this transition does to most women's bodies, independent of their efforts. But within that baseline, dietary pattern produces a measurable and significant difference in outcomes. Women who ate in a way that kept their insulin responses lower, more whole plant foods, less processed food, fewer refined carbohydrates, limited processed meats, gained measurably less weight and faced dramatically lower rates of developing obesity compared to women whose dietary patterns repeatedly spiked insulin throughout the day. The diet, with the strongest protective effect in the study, is not a branded protocol. It does not require a subscription, a coach, or a supplement stack. It is built around real food, minimally processed, centered on plants, designed to keep blood sugar stable rather than spike it repeatedly. And it appears to work with the postmenopausal body in a way that 30 years of restriction-based diet advice never managed to. 30 years of diet culture sold menopausal women smaller portions of the wrong food. The largest dietary study ever conducted on women in menopause is pointing somewhere else entirely. And now the data is there for any woman who wants to read it.